أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يعلم الله الذين جاهدوا منكم ويعلم الصابرين صدق الله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Brothers and sisters, comrades, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Now, I realize that I've discussed this subject before. However, what's happened is because I did that lecture before the war began and then our internet was suddenly cut off, I wasn't able to complete the discourse. And what I want to do is actually just discuss this with you. And there's lots of ways that I thought about how I would be able to convey the ideas and thoughts that I so desperately want to convey. And I went back and forth thinking maybe I should make a machinations video, maybe I should, I don't know, make it in a different way so that it's more accessible to people. But the reality is that I really, and I'm not saying this to sound arrogant or anything, but I really don't have time. And so while there's so many things that I want to get across to you, I'm going to just have to say it so that I can just get this information out there. It's extremely important, especially at this time. A lot of the youths and a lot of the people that I'm talking to out there, they're saying that they're feeling depression or they're feeling something strange is going on in their house or their family, and some of it is totally explainable and some of it is not. And when they start to elaborate, I realize that no, there definitely is something going on. And so what I want to do is give you as much information as I can so that you will be aware of the whole reality of the jinn and how, not so much black magic, but the jinn especially, because they are essentially what black magic is all about. Now, when you have this knowledge, it will arm you, it will empower you, it will strengthen you. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying these things so that you get scared. No, that's not my intention at all. I strongly believe that if you know, then things which would scare ordinary people won't scare you anymore. Okay, so the first thing that I want to tell you is that this is a reality. Okay, the reality of the jinn is a reality which is well grounded in the Quran and the Ahadith. And I don't think I need to present any arguments to back that up. I'm sure that you all are aware that the Quran has pretty much told us explicitly that there's a race of creatures that was created before humankind and they inhabit the earth. And just like human beings are made out of clay, they are made out of fire. And this is the key. There's many keys that the Quran actually gives us to help us to understand these deeper realities of this strange world that we're living in. And the reason why it's such a big key is because if you actually contemplate over the idea of something being made out of clay as opposed to fire, then you'll understand the general nature of the jinn. Human beings, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we're made out of clay, now I'm not saying it's entirely metaphorical, there might be a physical reality to it also. But the idea here is that we're very solid, we're grounded, we're attached to a physicality from which we barely can escape. Okay, the only time our souls actually leave our bodies is when we're sleeping, and that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually takes our souls up into the heavens. Jinns are not like that. They're not grounded, they're not attached completely and totally to some sort of physicality. They are like fire. And if you try to describe fire to people who have never seen it before, which of course probably is an impossibility, but imagine trying to do that, it would be very, very difficult. It's physical, but it's not physical. You can touch it, but you can't touch it. It can hurt you, but if you keep your hand far enough away, then it won't hurt you. If you pass your hand through it very fast, it doesn't really have much of an effect. This is actually the nature of the jinn. All right, so they're there, but they're not there. Okay, and one thing that I want us to thoroughly understand is that they're not in a different dimension. Sometimes we refer to them when we talk about them as if they are in an entirely different dimension and they're separated by some sort of barrier. There are other dimensions. There may well be portals in this world which lead you to almost different reality. I'm not denying that, but this idea that we have of the jinn being, separated physically from us is something that we need to overcome now. We need to realize that actually they're right here in this world with us. Okay? And not only that, but they're actually everywhere now, all over the place. And people are being affected by them, impacted by them. They're talking to them. They're being talked to by them without even recognizing that those are jinns that they're talking to. And the reason I'm saying that they're everywhere now is because there are a ludicrous amount of videos online which have caught them on camera now. And they catch them on camera, they catch their audio on camera. And some of them might be fake. Of course, some of them might be fake. But the sheer amount of videos that now exist, and if you go onto websites like YouTube, you're actually going to find so many videos which have been uploaded by people who have nothing to do with the supernatural. I'll give you a very quick example. There was a video, there was a guy who was uploading videos about something completely unrelated. I don't know if he was a chef or something like that, but he was uploading food videos perhaps, or health videos, or whatever it is. And at a certain point in one of the videos, a cupboard behind him just opens. How random is that? Completely strange. No wind, no nothing. Okay, now that's just a very surface level example so that you can understand that because there's so much cameras available to everybody, everybody has a phone now, a lot more of these incidents are being captured. And many of them are entirely unexplainable. Some of them are in households where you're going to see they know that there's something wrong. There is a haunting taking place. That's why they set up cameras, in order to capture it. And in some cases, they've got nothing to do with the supernatural and they capture it by accident. In any case, we have to understand that the reality that they are everywhere and they are constantly interacting with us is a reality that we have to get our heads around. There's also this idea that the interactions have actually increased as well. So it's not just that we have technology which is now capturing them, but also they are more prevalent in societies now. And I would urge you to go and look at the CERN tunnel opening ceremony. CERN, CERN tunnel opening ceremony. And the idea here was that the Great Hadron Collider, the idea that they're looking for a particle known as the God particle, and all the very bizarre science experiments that they are conducting have actually done something to our reality to a point where we're seeing them everywhere now. And the interactions between us and them has in fact increased. And I remember a Christian preacher actually talking about this, and he said that the scientists at CERN are trying to open up a portal, and either we are going to put something in or something is going to come out. The idea that there are portals to another dimension is an important idea also. Why? Because while, yes, they are everywhere, they're in this dimension with us, I believe that some of the bigger ones are actually, and the stronger ones, are actually in some sort of other realm. And so when we open up those portals, they are able to interact more freely with us. There's also a movie that just came out. Sayyid Abdullah actually mentioned it, and I was like, okay, fine, I'm going to watch that movie. It's called Back Rooms. Back Rooms is a movie. In fact, I won't give you spoilers, but again, I just want to show you that there is this idea being pushed by the satanic Hollywood elite that there are portals opening up. And often they don't tell you things unless they want to push a certain message. All right? They don't always lie to us. Sometimes they tell us the truths in a way that we will accept it, or in a way that we will think that, okay, that's just a fantasy and reject it. But the idea is to push this predictive programming. So when you're watching those kinds of movies, it's essentially training you how to think about a certain reality. There's also the theory, which has been around for God knows how long, but I heard it maybe 10 to 15 years ago. And the Arrival series actually touched on that. And they said it quite emphatically. And at that time, I was wondering, like, why is this such a big deal? And that was that they're going to stage a fake alien invasion and convince humanity that these are not demons, but actually intelligent beings from a different planet. And therefore, we should obey them. What does Surah Yasin tell us? It tells us, and in other places also, Ya ayyuhal insan, O humankind, la ta'budu shaitan. Do not worship shaitan. But ta'bud doesn't mean worship only. It means obedience. So it's essentially saying don't obey shaitan. And that's just a very quick point for you as well. When we're saying in Surah Fatiha 10 times a day, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدْ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, ye alone do we worship, ye alone do we call for help. We're not just saying we only worship you, O Allah. We're saying that we only serve you. We only obey you. All right, and it's a very important point because in many ahadith and even in the tafsir of certain verses of the Quran, for example, where it says that the Christians or the Jews took their scholars, their rabbis, and their priests as gods, when you look at the tafsir, it doesn't mean that they worship them literally, but rather that they obeyed them. They listened to them, they gave ear to them, and they obeyed them. Why is this so important in the context of our discussion? Because what's happening is we, without knowing it, are in fact worshipping jinns. We are obeying jinns who have entered into our lives, and we're actually listening to them and obeying them. The CERN also, which is really, really concerning, is that they have a statue outside of their facility of a Hindu god / goddess. And that's a very strange thing. And when that was revealed, a lot of people were raising their eyebrows and they were saying, well, what does a science facility in Western Europe have to do with a Hindu god? You see, you have to understand that many of the gods which have been worshipped by ancient cultures were real jinns. That's literally what they look like. So when you see a god, an idol with blue skin, and you know all these legends are created about it, well, those are real things. Those are real entities. And I like to insert this also here because there's a lot of youths who might be going towards hallucinogenic drugs. And you might think that I'm stretching here or reaching here, but I'm actually not. Even in the Hawza, I remember a former Hawza student who's not here anymore. He left after reading like studying for like 2 or 3 years, as most Hausa students do. He was discussing about a certain drug which is being pushed by people like Joe Rogan, these podcasters, and that drug is said to open the third eye, open the spiritual mind to all sorts of ideas which didn't exist before. One person who took such a drug, he actually saw the Hindu god, and they said, I saw its hands, because they're often depicted with 4 or 8 arms. He said, I actually saw that, and its arms were moving very, very fast. And that's how, when they get involved with, I don't know, magic mushrooms and those kinds of drugs, they actually witness certain things. When they witness them, they say, Hinduism is correct. There's a reality behind that, and they go towards this kind of New Age, Buddhist, Hindu doctrine, because they see it with their own eyes. And as they say, seeing is believing. So if you see such a creature, you think that it's a benevolent being, you think that it's a great creature, and you actually start worshipping it. But the reason this is being mentioned at this point, guys, is because certain big ones, the ifritun min al-jinn, they might be the ones who are in the other dimensions. And if they were to come into our realm, they could create absolute havoc, right? So those great shayateen, those great jinns who were there in the time of Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, for example, they might be in a form of imprisonment. But I'm not talking about the ifrit, okay? Because they are very, very rare. There might be a couple of them in the entire realm of existence. All right, most jinns are not like that. Okay, so what I want us to understand is the physiological reality of the jinns, and if we can understand this, then so much of our fears will actually just dissipate. That's really what I want to focus on. And I am conscious of the fact that I might have said these things before, but I want to give it a more thorough discourse and actually just really hit home with this idea at this point, so that you're well prepared for anything that might come next. So I want you to think about the human being, and going back to the analogy of the clay and how we're made out of clay. If you look at a human being, we're very fascinating creatures, and if you take even a single drop of our blood, put it under the microscope, you're going to see that every little bit of us is essentially alive. The blood cells are alive, the skin cells are alive. They have a membrane around them, and they have a nucleus, which is essentially the brain of the cell, and that's what's telling it to do whatever it's doing. Blood cells, for example, carrying oxygen all around our body. White blood cells are like the police of our body. They're going around capturing the viruses and the bacteria that might enter. Okay, now that is the physiological reality of what a human being is, and the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. If you cut off the finger of a human being, sorry, I'm talking about this really in a kind of dicey way, but look, if you cut off the finger of a human being, or if an accident happens and his finger gets cut off, that finger is essentially cut off entirely from the human being, and it can't be reconnected unless you go to hospital and they sew it back on, or whatever they do. But the idea is that it separates from the body, okay? And those cells eventually die, all right? And our souls are so connected to our bodies that if our body dies, there is no way, essentially and typically, for the soul to return to the body. Okay, this is the human physiological reality. Jinns are very similar to that, except the soul can come back to the body. Okay, so they also have cells. Just like we have cells, they have cells too. All right, so think about something very tiny, very microscopic, which if you look at it under the microscope, it too is it seems to be alive. And what I'm getting at here is they are essentially bacteria, predominantly bacteria, perhaps viruses too. And the bacteria, and we're just going to call them microbes from here on in. Microbes are the blood cells of the shayateen, of the jinn. Okay, now when you understand this, you're going to understand so many of the ahadith and so many of the myths and legends that you might have heard about them will suddenly make sense. For example, you might have heard that the jinn eat garbage, they eat trash, they eat rubbish. Okay, so whenever you leave the trash out at night, the jinns are actually coming and eating that. Now, the way that you imagine that when you're a child is, I'm going to stay away from the the bin because I don't want to be walking past the garbage outside in the street in the night before the garbage man comes to pick them up. And I don't want to see a little goblin creature crouching over the bin and eating out of it. Or some people might see cats, ripping open the bags and be like, oh, it must be a jinn. No, it's not like that at all. There are many things which the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam were not able to explain to us because science had not developed enough for human beings to understand it at that point. Essentially, what they were saying is that the bacteria, i.e. the cells of the jinns, are going to be consuming the trash. When they consume that trash, you see, the jinn can't survive without its blood cells, just like a human being can't survive without its blood cells, right? So the microbes which are consuming the litter and the rubbish, those are the blood cells of the jinn. Okay, I'll give you another example, which you might have heard, but there's a hadith which says that when you're eating meat, make sure you leave a little bit of the meat on the bone. Why? Because it's the food of the jinns. And this is, by the way, you guys, when you're eating meat, try to leave a little bit on the bones. Don't clean that bone completely. Actually leave a little bit for the jinns. Now, again, it doesn't mean that you're going to see bones floating around or you're going to see a very devilish looking little creature, eating the bones. No, that's not how it works. That's not how jinns eat. Jinns, at least on a lower level, they need the nutrients for their microbes. Once the microbes are nourished, then they can gather them and actually become physical. Just like we have a completely different system. We actually have to put it into our mouths and then the food goes into our stomach and we digest it, and through that process, our cells are nourished. Jinns aren't like that, okay? They are automatically nourished by the microbes, okay? So you have to understand this because at the base level, at the most basic, if you rip down a jinn to its bare bones, to its bare minimum, not bones, that's going to confuse this, but to the basics of what a jinn is it's just a ball of energy. It's just a ball of energy and it just floats around. Okay? And without the microbes, that's all a jinn is. That's all you'll actually see. Now, the jinn, and this is why, by the way, if you look at a lot of these videos, they don't even notice it. They just see the apparition or the shadowy creature. Right before that, you might notice that there are tiny little specks of light floating around and you mistake it for dust. And I was actually in somebody's house, may Allah bless them, and they were saying that we're feeling lots of strange things happening. They thought that they were going to be killed because somebody had blocked they'd done something on their rooftop. So they set up CCTV cameras. Instead of seeing human beings, what did they see? Orbs of light floating really oddly by the camera, and it's very distinct from dust. All right, you might see dust particles floating around, but these orbs of light are really distinct. Now, when you get a small orb, and I want to give you an example of this because Disney has been pushing this. If you remember Tinkerbell, Tinkerbell from Peter Pan, how is she depicted? As a tiny ball of light. Also the fairy godmother from Pinocchio. Yeah, Pinocchio. Also, another one comes to mind. I think there might be a scene where the three little fairies in what is it, Cinderella? Yeah, Cinderella. Anyway, it's always pushing this idea of a fairy godmother coming in the form of a ball of light, and then it turns into this little woman creature. Okay, that is a reality, and it just goes to show how the elites behind Disney, they know all sorts which they're not going to talk about. But it goes further and beyond Disney also, because this has always been a kind of a myth and a legend which has existed throughout the world. And one of those legends is called the Will-o'-the-Wisp. Will-o'-the-Wisp. You might not have heard of this. I hadn't heard of it, and it's such a strange thing, but there's a legend of this very strange ball of light which just floats around, and it seems to have a consciousness in swamps and places like that in the West particularly. It's called the Will-o'-the-Wisp. The only reason I heard about this is because I'm a total nerd and I play video games, and in one of the video games, Final Fantasy, is this recurring monster that you have to fight. And in my head, I'm like, this is the most uncreative, stupid monster I could ever imagine. It's just a ball of electricity. Why would they put that in a video game? That doesn't make any sense. And you'll actually see it in other places too. I can't remember where else I saw it, but it's always got called the same. Oblivion. If you guys might be familiar with Skyrim or Oblivion, and there's just this ball of light, and it's as soon as you see it, you freak out because it's like level 3000 or something, and if you try and fight it, it's gonna destroy you. And I'm like, okay, why do these things exist in these video games? And I believe I've seen it in other places too. There's a reality behind it, folklore behind it. People have seen it, they've interacted with it, they've made legends and stories about it. And now, when you come to the modern world, you're going to see that actually there's a real phenomenon. It's called ball lightning. Ball lightning is one of those things that nobody can really explain. Scientists try and give their explanation about it, but that doesn't explain what it actually is. And the idea is that if you go online, you can actually see these things. They're called ball lightning. And they're just floating orbs of electricity. Loads of people have seen it. And I remember when I was doing research into this, one guy said, I don't believe that he was like a believer in God or religion or anything, just a random atheist guy. And he was just like, I saw one when I was a kid, and it came up to me as if it could see my face. And almost as if it was conscious, it just left. As easily as it came and looked at me, it left. And I got the distinct feeling as though this thing is alive. So what I want to tell you is that these are alive. They really are alive. And they are the jinns in their most basic form. Okay, so when you see a tiny one, tiny one, that is just, that is a very weak-willed jinn, or a child, if you like. It's a weak-willed jinn. When you see a big one, because I've seen one which was, I don't know, like 2 meters across, that is a bloomin' big shaitan. Maybe not shaitan. Maybe it's just a good jinn, right? But it's a very, very powerful one. When they are in that form, they're pretty useless. They can't do much except maybe electrocute you to death or give you a little bit of a shocking feeling. But what they do is, depending on how strong the will of that jinn is, it will basically conjure to itself microbes. It will conjure microbes to itself. And when it conjures these microbes to itself, that's when it actually takes physical form. Before then, it's just a floating orb of light. That's the soul of the jinn, essentially. Okay, so if you could separate your soul from your body, let's say theoretically, maybe it would look like that. Right? It's a floating consciousness. And sometimes they might be microscopic, you can't even see them. But this explains, number one, how they can travel great distances. Because in their most basic form, they weigh next to nothing. They can move faster than the wind. And what they're doing is that they are essentially so let's say that a jinn, right, that floating orb, it comes to a certain place. Let's say it goes to a garbage heap. At that garbage heap, it can sense that there's lots of microbes there, and it will suck all of them towards itself and become physical. So it will take the form of an old lady or a man, maybe a cat, right? It will take a form that's something that you are more or less familiar with, a physical form. And then when it wants to travel from that garbage heap to, I don't know, another country, it will abandon that form. And the soul itself will leave the jinn's body and it will fly to another place really, really fast. And then in that place, it will reform again in the same form or a similar form. And so to the human, it seems like, wow, it just traveled so fast. It didn't really need to travel that fast. Do you remember that scene from The Mummy, classic movie, The Mummy, where it shows that the mummy, they close the door to protect this girl, but then the mummy actually just turns into sand and goes through the keyhole of the door. And then when it's on the other side, it forms back into a man. It's kind of like that, except it happens very, very fast. Okay, so I don't know. This might be sounding like crazy, or like I'm just espousing some crazy theory. Listen, this is something that I've been researching and formulating for a long time now. I've talked to a lot of people privately about it, scholars and researchers here in the holy city of Qom. They've given me more information, or they've, so I'm not just talking out of nothing here. I am trying to tell you an actual reality of the way that these things work. And another example of this is in the movie Constantine. In Constantine, which is with Keanu Reeves, if you haven't watched the movie, it's not a great movie, if I'm being honest. It's okay. It's a little bit dark, but not in a good way. But anyway, that deals with servants of God fighting against the servants of Satan, etc. The Judaic influence in that movie is so obvious. But anyway, in there they show that there's lots of insects in the air, and those insects come together to form like a demonic face or creature. And then Constantine has to shoot them or kill them or throw holy water on them. And then basically there's one scene where when he attacks them, it explodes into lots of insects and they go all over the place, and then he's squashing them with his shoes. That's kind of like what it is. Okay, so when you understand this reality, you're not going to be as afraid of them, because you're going to understand that when they take physical form, they can interact with you. They can touch things. They can move objects, right? And then that also means, however, that you can interact with them. You can hurt them. Okay, and that's something we're going to talk about in the next discussion. But at this point, I just want to focus on actually understanding that physical reality of them. But they can, when they take physical form, bite, scratch, push things. They can, sometimes people will be waking up with bruises on their bodies. These are from them. They are doing that. Or for example, many people have experienced it, and I'm sure many of you guys listening have experienced it too, where you actually get sleep paralysis, where you wake up, you can't even move. you feel like there's something very heavy sitting on your chest. And at certain points, you have to understand these entities are invisible, because even if they have gathered the microbes, sometimes you can see them because they've become so thick, right? The concentration of the microbes is so heavy that you can actually see them, and usually they appear as shadowy figures. But sometimes they're very the concentration of the microbes is much less, and at that point you can't actually see them. Okay, so this is what the jinn's physicality is. Now, what is the impact that you might experience? You're going to feel shivers. You're going to feel shivers down your spine. Even if you're not afraid, you are going to feel those shivers. And I remember, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, Allah's given me the tawfiq to perform exorcisms, if you can call it that. But I believe I've told you guys before, but the lady who was at the shrine of Sayyidah Ma'asuma, and she was crying for help, and she was saying, can somebody help me? There's basically things were happening to her where she was feeling somebody's hand around her throat when she's sleeping, and then she wanted to believe that it's just her imagination, but then her son woke up and he said, I'm feeling somebody squeeze my neck when I'm trying to sleep. So at that point, she realized it's not her imagination, and she started to get really scared. And it got worse and worse and worse, to the point where she was actually hearing a voice telling her some dreadful things. But anyway, I went to that lady's house. I said, listen, give me your keys. Tell you and your husband and your kids, just go to the park for a little while. So I went to her house, and I remember at a certain point, I went to the back of her kitchen, and there was this area which had a curtain, and it was like a windowsill, really, really dark, gloomy, exactly how you'd imagine it to be in a horror movie. And as I approached, I knew that the entity is sitting right there behind the curtain. Thank Allah, because this is another part of the reality of these entities. Some people can see them, and some people can't. Okay, so even though there is a physical dimension to them which can be explained scientifically, there is an element to this which is really, really difficult to explain. But hopefully going forward, you're going to understand a little bit more about that. But anyway, as I approached this window, and I was about to pull open the curtain, I got the worst chills all the way down my back. And I wasn't afraid. That was the strangest thing about it. I know that I wasn't afraid. I'm not scared of anything. Alhamdulillah, Allah's freed me from fear at all. And you might have heard me talking about cowardice before, and how terrible cowardice is, because a true Muslim who really believes in Allah, I can't understand how they can be afraid. Oh, I still have like fear of heights and stuff like that, by the way. If you put me in a high place, I am terrified. Like, I will freeze up. My stomach starts rolling. So I'm not entirely free of every fear, of course. Every human being has that to a certain extent, unless you're like a prophet or an imam. But when it comes to jinns, man, I ain't scared at all. I ain't scared at all, alhamdulillah. And yet I got the chills. And so that helped me to add this point to the discussion, and that is, sometimes you're going to feel these really distinct chills. And it might fool you into thinking that you're afraid. You're not afraid. That's just the physiological effect and impact that these entities have on human beings. And it might have something to do with the electrical kind of predisposition of the jinn's soul. That's the impact it has on you, right? So even when you feel your hairs standing up, it might not be fear. That, when it happens, it makes you afraid. Because you're like, okay, your natural instinct is to be afraid. But actually, it's just the kind of, I don't know, the static energy of those entities when they're there. And so what I want to ask everybody to do is to stop denying your own intuitions. This is a problem that I see quite frequently, where people are saying, I've heard such and such thing, I've felt such and such thing, I've seen such and such thing, but it must be my imagination. Why are you doing that? No, there's a scientific explanation. Okay, Scientifically, if you yourself have seen something, felt something, and you yourself have experienced something, why are you denying your own experience just because of what mainstream science says? It doesn't make sense. If you were truly scientifically minded, you would trust your own eyes. So when they say seeing is believing, I don't believe that. It's not true, because so many people have seen things, but the very next moment they deny them. Well, why do you deny what you've seen, what you've heard, what you yourself have felt? No, they say no. One of the explanations that I've heard for sleep paralysis is that the part of the brain that tells you to wake up hasn't been triggered, so you're still asleep, but you're somehow still awake. And I'm not saying that that is not explaining the how. Of course, there's a how behind everything, but it's not explaining the why. Why have you just suffered sleep paralysis, for example? Let's say that you see a shadowy figure in the form, on the image of a human being. There's a scientific explanation for it, but some of them are so far-fetched, like, the shadows from this light and that light just happen to form a being-like figure, right? Why are you trying to do that? Stop explaining it away. It is there. Jinns are a reality. Let's get over it. Okay? So please stop denying your own intuition. It is really important for you to be conscious of your own thoughts when you're undergoing some sort of supernatural experience. And imagination, this might sound like a contradiction, but imagination does have a very big role to play in this. But just because you're imagining something doesn't mean it's not real. Oh my God, that sounds so crazy. I'm going to have to explain that a little bit. So in Islam, in akhlaq, when you study akhlaq and when you look at the works of the greats like Imam Khomeini and Ayatollah Bahjat, they talk about 4 faculties in the human being. And I've given lectures about this before. I'm not sure where they've gone, but I'm sure they're floating around somewhere. But the 4 faculties, it's really important. Aql, imagination. So aql is intelligence, imagination. Shahwa, which is passion or desire. And anger. Okay, so let's just focus on the intelligence and imagination. And in a nutshell, guys, intelligence helps you to see that which you can see, understand that which you can see, what you can feel, what you can hear, what you can prove. The imagination is the eyes of the heart. It helps you to see things that you can't actually see. Okay, and I know that this sounds like a contradiction, but it will make more sense as we go forward. The idea here is that there are all sorts of things that those jinns can push, can communicate to us, which we will understand and interpret in our own ways. So, for example, right now, I am speaking. There's words coming out of my mouth. Those are just expressions of the thoughts that I have up here in my mind. That is now going through the camera and the signals. It's being carried through the air and it's going to you. Then it's hitting your eardrums and you are interpreting that in your own way. You're understanding it in whatever way you can understand it. The jinns, it's a very similar thing. The interpretation that we have of the communication that they are giving can sometimes be very different, and it varies from person to person. Okay, so I will see something and somebody else will see something else. What the jinn is actually trying to convey might be something else entirely. All right, and I want to give you an example of this. There was a woman who, I remember, this is just a story that I heard, but it might help as a puzzle piece in the grander picture. She had converted to Islam. And when she converted to Islam, she'd look out of her window and every day she'd see this woman with a white dress and there was a black spot on her dress. And every day she'd see this and it would disappear behind a car or a bus. So she went to an alim and she asked him, what is going on? What is this thing, this apparition that I'm seeing? And he said that that is a Muslim among the jinns. And it's basically just trying to tell you that it's very good that you've become a Muslim, but there's still one sin that you're committing. So she went back and whatever that sin was, she stopped doing it. The next day, she saw the same jinn, and this time the black spot was gone. And after that, she never saw it again. The way that jinns communicate can be very strange, bizarre for us, right? And there are good ones amongst them who are trying to communicate good things, but our imagination interprets it in a slightly different way. And sometimes we can't interpret what we're seeing. Okay, and when it comes to the imagination, I want to explain at this point that there is a precedence for this, which has been alluded to in Hollywood also. So, for example, Ghostbusters. If you remember the original classic Ghostbusters movie, there's a scene where the demons, right at the end of the movie, they are saying that we are going to destroy your city, but we're going to let you decide what destroys your city. And so they say, okay, don't think of anything. Clear your mind. Don't think of anything. Don't give them a monster. But the fat guy, the fat character, he can't help but think of something. And they say, what did you think of? And he says, I tried to think of the least harmful thing I could think of, and that was the Marshmallow Man. The really soft, pudgy, cute Marshmallow Man. And the jinn which is summoned thereafter to destroy their entire city is a giant Marshmallow Man. It's all very comical and funny, but the idea here is that sometimes your own mind is used by the jinns to conjure that physicality that they wish to conjure. Okay, so another example of this is in Harry Potter, where they have a creature called the Boggart. Do you guys remember the Boggart? The creature which always hides in people's cupboards, and it will appear in the form of whatever the person fears most. So Harry Potter sees it, and it appears in the form of a Dementor. Ronald Weasley sees it, and it appears in the form of a spider, because he's terrified of spiders. Now, this idea, and there's many of these kinds of ideas in Harry Potter which are actually quite accurate. This is a reality behind a lot of these entities, because when they want to take physical form, right? They want to they've got all these microbes, but they don't know which form to take. They look at your mind. They read your mind, at least what's on the surface of your mind, and that's the shape that they take. Right? And this should show you how important it is to rid yourself of fears, because it's those fears which are literally used against you in the case of the jinns. Now, I want to elaborate on this because a lot of people don't understand how the jinns communicate. If you understood how the jinns communicate, then all of this would make a lot more sense. They don't necessarily talk with their lips and with their tongues and with their vocal cords. In fact, they might not even have tongues or lips or vocal cords. Predominantly, they can, by the way, they can make noises, they can make physical sounds which you can physically hear with your eardrums, and that's going to take them quite a bit of effort. But predominantly, they speak telepathically. Really important for us to understand. They speak telepathically, and I want to elaborate on how exactly they do this. They can't read your mind. Don't get it wrong. Don't think that the jinn is uber powerful and they can go into the depths of your mind. No, they're not like that at all. Get rid of that thought, because that's not true. What they do, in fact, is whatever is on the surface of your mind, they will be able to see that. So right now, if I say to you elephant, what came into your mind? At the forefront of your mind, you will have no other way around it. You're going to think of an elephant. Every single person out there is imagining an elephant. What color is the elephant? I'm thinking of a blue one. I don't know why. A blue elephant is what came into my mind. But the idea here is that whatever you bring to the forefront of your mind, we're not talking about the subconscious mind, the forefront of your mind, that is what the jinn is going to pick up on. And that is precisely how they communicate. Again, if you go to Hollywood, there's a movie called Ouija, The Origin of Evil. It's not a very popular movie. We just stumbled across it, and me and my wife, we watched it. But in that movie, it was the first time that I noticed Hollywood was finally actually opening up about this reality. And there's a scene in there where this girl who's tricking everyone into believing that she can communicate with their dead relatives. And so they're making lots of money off people who they're actually conning. These poor people, they come to them, they say, I want to talk to my dead grandfather or my dead wife or my dead husband. And they come and they sit, and this happens all the time in the land of the great Satan America. They're called seances. It's all over the media, it's all over movies, there's advertisements everywhere. You can get into these seances, and what you do is you go, you sit in front of this psychic. Most of it is a scam, but some of it is real. And what they do is, what you ask the psychic or the leader of the seance, what was my grandmother's name? And the person will give you your grandmother's name, and you'll be shocked. You'll be like, whoa, how did this person just do that? This is real. This is legit. And then you'll say, tell me something. What are they saying? And they'll tell you something that only your grandmother could have known. At that point, what are you going to do? Wow, this person really is a prophetic individual. They have real powers. They have some sort of divine gift. No, they don't. No, they don't. They're just communicating with a jinn. And whenever you ask a question, you're thinking of the answer. Just like the elephant, you're bringing the answer to the forefront of your mind. That is what the jinn is seeing. They convey this to the seance leader or to the psychic, and that's what they're telling you. And this Hollywood movie, subhanallah, it actually showed that this happened because a priest came to the house and he asks the girl, for example, I can't remember the exact quote, but he says, what was my wife's name? And he brings the name Agatha to his mind. Agatha, 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 Agatha. And she says Agatha. And he pretends to be like, wow, oh my God, this is real. Then he takes the mother upstairs and he says, your daughter is not communicating with dead spirits. She is communicating with demons. And the mother says, how do you know? And he says, my wife's name is not Agatha. It was Christy. But when I asked her the question of what my wife's name is, instead of thinking of Christy, I was thinking of Agatha. That's what the demon picked up on, and that's what the demon gave to your daughter. So if you're ever in a situation where there's a street magician and he's trying to read your mind or whatever, stop thinking about that thing that you want him to do. He says, pick a card. You pick the ace of spades and you're looking at it and there's no way that he can guess it. But what are you thinking in your mind? Ace of spades, ace of spades, ace of spades. The jinn picks up on that and he tells the guy, ace of spades, and he says it as a very crude example. What you want to do in order to fool them is bring something else entirely to the forefront of your mind, because that is what the jinn will pick up on, and then they'll get the answer wrong. Okay? So it's very important what you're bringing to the forefront of your mind. That is how you're going to communicate. Okay, so another way that the jinns communicate is through symbolism. And you always wonder to yourself, why does all this symbolism exist? Why is the flag of Israel the six-pointed star? Why does it have 6 sides and 6 points and 6 triangles? Why? 666, obviously. I mean, it's all about numerology and symbolism. But that same symbol, you might see it in the hands of a mystic among the Muslims, and you'll be like, why do you have such an evil symbol? It's because no symbols are inherently evil. No colors are inherently evil. No numbers are inherently evil. All the numbers and all the colors actually belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. they're in their essence all good. Everything that Allah has created is good. What matters is the intention behind certain symbols when they're used and when they're created. Because you're basically inputting what's in the forefront of your mind into the symbol when you write it or when you draw it. And so that's how they basically communicate. And there's lots of books that you can actually get your hands on, which I don't recommend, obviously, and I don't think that you should ever do that because it's haram and it's black magic. And according to Islam, the punishment for such a crime is actually death. That's how grave a sin black magic actually is. So I'm not recommending anybody to go towards this. But for example, the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon and some of the books like the Goetia, which you might have heard of, black magicians like Aleister Crowley, which I'm sure you're just sick of me talking about because I go on and on and on about it. But Aleister Crowley is one of the greatest, most terrible black magicians of the modern world. But these books, what are they? When you go into these books, it's just the name of the jinn and its symbol. The name of the jinn and its symbol. The name of the jinn, and each jinn, it just shows you what this jinn can do. This jinn can give you fertility, it can make women fall in love with you, it can make you rich, it can make you famous. This jinn will give you good fortune, all sorts of things, okay? And that is how the elite have actually done it. They've followed a certain principle, a certain religion, a certain science by which they have reach the upper echelons of society. Now, nothing comes without a cost and a price. So when they summon one of these entities, which again, please, 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 dear comrades, don't play with these things. Don't play with Ouija boards. Don't play with summoning books. Don't try to attract these entities. There's a whole community online now who are openly talking about it, who have openly gone towards paganism, and they ruin their lives. There's so many threads that I've read where, for example, somebody invites a certain spirit into their house and now they can't get rid of it and it's just wreaking havoc in their house. Or it makes them go insane. Don't play around with these things. I'm not encouraging that at all. But essentially what these upper elites have done, the great celebrities of the satanic American and Western world, what they have done is under the guidance of certain satanic priests. They're Jewish priests, okay? What they've done under their guidance is summoned certain entities. That doesn't come without a price. Even the smallest jinn that is summoned, it requires some sort of sacrifice. That's why, dear brothers and sisters, dear comrades, there's always some sort of blood ritual, some sort of najasa, some sort of, you have to kill a chicken, you have to kill a goat. And when you go higher and higher, if you want a bigger sacrifice and a bigger jinn working for you and paving the way to your worldly success, it's not sufficient. They need the blood of children. They need the blood or the semen of adults. They want corpses to feast on. So going back now to the whole idea that the microbes of jinns are basically their blood cells, well, most of the jinn are just like people. Okay, there's good and bad amongst them, but none of them are quite that evil. When you have najasa, and particularly, astaghfirullah, but the corpse of a child, it brings tears to my eyes because there's things I can't tell you that these elites have done, because honestly, it's caused me depression when I've found them out. And actually, there's no way to prove it either unless you really, really go deep. But anyway, when you bring the corpse of a child, a Muslim jinn will never feast from it. It will never take the microbes which have been nourished from the corpse of a child, or from a holy individual when you kill them, or a good, pure person when you kill them. The good jinns are never going to form from that. It is only the evil, the shayateen among the jinn, who actually benefit from that. And they are the ones who do all this, the really, really nasty stuff. So if you think about human beings, and among human beings, there's like 1% of human beings which basically own all the economies and powers of the world. In the jinn world, it's very similar. There is 1% of them which are so despicable, so vile, so evil. May Allah damn them all to hell very, very soon. They are the ones who are working together, and that's why Imam Khamenei talked about this idea of the evil ones. They're actually awliya ba'd, ba'duhum awliya ba'd, right? He quotes the verse of the Quran saying how the shayateen among the humans and the jinn, they're actually helping each other, they're coordinating with each other. Okay, so it's a very important point. Now, I've come to the end of this part of the discussion. In the next discussion, inshallah, what I want to help you with, I really pray Allah gives me tawfiq, but I want to help you with how to combating them, because the prerequisite to fighting something is to first understand what that thing is. So I hope that this has helped you to understand what they essentially are. And in the next episode, or the next lecture, inshallah, I want to actually discuss with you how to combat them and how to fight them. May Allah keep you all safe, protected, inshallah, under the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no greater protection than that. وَصَلُّوا عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَآلِ مُحَمَّدٍ.